This is Simon's Whispers. I'm answering a request today for somebody said they wanted a random facts video. There's been a couple of people that have mentioned similar things, so instead of random facts, these are facts about Antarctica. This is from you're going to learn a little bit about me actually today. The job that I keep talking about that takes so much time is that I'm a teacher, and I teach students that are in secondary school, and we've been looking at Antarctica. So I've got some material from a lesson that I'd made, and I think that would be quite fitting for, instead of random facts, just facts. So, Antarctica, if you look on a world map, is the huge continent of ice, which is as far south as you can get, the South Pole. It is classed as a continent. It's the only continent in the world that has no countries. Since it was first discovered by the Russians in 1820, and first actually landed on a year later, in 1821, lots of countries laid claim to different parts of Antarctica. Now, in the 1950s, it was decided that there'd be a treaty. 12 countries signed a treaty to say that nobody could own land in Antarctica. No country could claim that that land was theirs, that it was the sovereign territory of any country, and that all of the scientific research done on Antarctica had to be for peaceful purposes, and all research had to be shared freely as well. It's not just 12 people, rather 12 countries that have signed that now. When I last checked, there were 49 countries that had signed that. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is break Antarctica down into a few areas. The first is wildlife. Now, Antarctica is home to penguins, seals, several different kinds of whale, and seabirds. Now notice I've said seabirds in addition to penguins, even though penguins are of course birds. Now, each animal in this ecosystem relies heavily on another for food. So, the killer whales, for example, rely on seals for food. They eat the seals. Now the seals, they eat fish that are in the water. They eat krill. Now, the seals don't just need the krill to survive the fish, but they also need somewhere where they can get out of the water to breathe and rest and to mate. If the ice melts in Antarctica, these seals may not survive. If they fail to survive, then that also affects the killer whales in the area as well, who could potentially die as well. guess a whale might be sensible enough to migrate somewhere else if there was no food. The penguins rely on the krill as well, as do the seabirds as well. Okay, so things like the albatross. These animals are now protected by law, which means you can't go hunting for penguins if you go to Antarctica. So they can't be hunted for food, money or sport. It's also worth pointing out that there are no humans from Antarctica. The next area we'll look at is tourism. Tourism and the everlasting burger. An estimated 5,000 people visit Antarctica every year. They arrive on planes and huge ships. We already know that aeroplanes do warm the skies very slightly, but the numbers of planes that go to the Antarctic are not likely to make a significant effect. They do, however, disturb local wildlife. The huge icebreaker ships used to reach Antarctica have to break through sea ice, as their name suggests. They do change this untouched environment in some way by breaking up those big pieces of ice that we're trying to look after. Most permanent buildings are not allowed to be built in Antarctica, so most are huge temporary structures that just give scientists and tourists somewhere to rest, but they're not proper buildings with foundations. This is so that they can be broken down in separate parts and loaded back onto ships and aeroplanes once they're finished with. Even when tourists and researchers go to the toilet, all of their waste has to be put into bags and then put onto planes and ships when they leave, because it's too cold to actually break down, and there are no sewers on it, in Antarctica, because you're not allowed to build those permanent structures or systems anywhere on the continent. If you were to drop a hamburger on the floor in Antarctica, it would be there forever. The bacteria that would normally make it rot away in the UK, that's where I am, they don't live in Antarctica. Both the burger and its paper would never rot. Now imagine what would happen if we were allowed to build a McDonald's in Antarctica for all of the tourists, and they just happened to drop as much litter as they do here. Now we're going to look at population. Now we've said that nobody lives in Antarctica permanently. At any one time, it's thought that there were more than 4,000 scientists in Antarctica. Now, I know that there's a clever dick who's been listening that's going to contradict me now and say that 5,000 people visit Antarctica, but all I'm talking about out of these 4,000 are scientists. 5,000 people in total, but 4,000 are scientists. These scientists are from all over the world, and it's the law that they all share whatever they learn. This law is from the Antarctic Treaty that made sure the countries wouldn't argue over who owns Antarctica. And this is why Antarctica is the only continent in the world that's never ever had a war. anything behind. Now we'll look at climate. Antarctica is almost completely covered by ice. 98% is ice, 2% is rock. The average thickness of the ice is 1.2 miles, or 1.8 kilometres. The temperature at the South Pole is usually around minus 69 degrees C, but the lowest ever recorded temperature in the world is actually minus 93 degrees C, which was actually taken in Antarctica in 2013. Global temperatures have been increasing, and Antarctica's ice has been melting quicker than previously recorded. If Antarctica was to melt, global sea levels would rise by around 65 metres, and cities like London and New York could be completely underwater. So that would be all coastal cities. The world's governments have reduced the amount of chemicals from spray bottles and refrigerators called CFCs. These are known to damage the ozone layer. So a lot of bottles that you see, spray cans, do say that they're free of CFCs. So far, banning CFCs hasn't actually reduced the hole in the ozone layer just yet. Reports over the past few years have been that there's been an increase in skin cancer on the continents around Antarctica. So there's been an increase around South Africa and in Australia. So if anything, the problem may well be getting more serious. Of course, with all of these things, these stats always get sensationalised. So it's difficult to really gauge whether they're accurate or not, because it depends who's actually paying for this research to be done. Because of course, they'll always make sure that their research, the results of their research, suits the person that's commissioned the research in the first place, that's paid for it. Okay. So global warming, the use of fossil fuels like oil, gas and coal creates greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane that are warming the planet. Most of the developed world now produce these gases on a huge scale by using cars, aeroplanes, factories, and also through heavy agriculture. The average temperature in some parts of the world has risen by over 2.5 degrees C. This doesn't seem like a lot, but if we continue to warm the planet, we could melt so much of Antarctica's ice that our major cities end up flooded underwater. Governments around the world have agreed now that global warming does actually exist, but still try to argue that it's not just caused by humans, that it's part of a natural cycle. Now there is evidence to suggest that during the Bronze Age there was in fact a warm period where it was actually a lot warmer on average than it is now, and that the world does move in cycles in terms of the temperature of the Earth. Whether this is because of the axis of the Earth's rotation around the Sun, which does alter very slightly every year, we don't go straight round, very slightly every year. There is an argument to suggest that that does change, and there's a cycle which takes 60 years or 40 years to change, which explains why in the 1970s and 1980s summers in the UK were extremely hot, whereas at the moment our summers have not been as hot during the summer in recent years, and that it's actually part of a sort of cycle, if you will. Okay. Whether that's true or not, we won't know just yet. Again, it depends who's commissioned that research to what sort of results we find, because it usually suits the person that's commissioned that research. So, very difficult to really tell, but we can't ignore the fact that we are producing so much CO2 and other gases into the atmosphere and heat into the atmosphere that we are having an effect. Now, at this point of the lesson, the students actually answer a long question, because they'll have done research, moving around the room and collecting all of the information that you've just seen, well, you've just heard rather. Now, they would use a big framework sheet, an A3 size sheet, to collect that information. It's got questions on it about the information that's placed around the room. This was quite a fun lesson because I'd used A3 paper that I'd scrunched up and then opened flat and stuck to the walls to make the whole classroom look like we were in an Antarctic ice cave. I'd got some science goggles, just the transparent eye protector goggles, one for each student. I'd put white sheets on every table. I've got some fluffy animals as well, so I had a penguin, a shark, which was an inflatable. It's supposed to be a whale, but I didn't have any shark. I didn't have any whales, so I had a shark, and I'd cut out some seals and things like that to put on the tables as well. I'd got some like stormy, windy kind of sounds, and a video for when they first came in of an icebreaker ship on its way to go and get some explorers going to research Antarctica. So they've gone around the room in their goggles. I've got a jacket on, a big outdoor jacket with a hat. I've got a skeleton from in the science department, and I put a big coat on him and put some goggles on him and sat him in the corner with my rucksack. So in the ice cave there was a dead explorer. So the kids had a lot of fun in this lesson, and I hope you guys have too. So that was just 19 minutes now. So I'm going to have to go before this file gets too large to upload. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'll speak to you